Welcome again, dear students. Myself, Dr. Kaleem Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Now, in today's lecture, we will discuss a very important topic, that is biodiversity and climate change. What actually the biodiversity? Let's try to find out what actually the climate change is. Climate change actually refers to the long-term change in temperatures and weather due to human activities. We can say increase in average global temperatures and extreme and unpredictable weathers are the most common indices of the climate change. On the other hand, biodiversity, from the day first we are actually discussing the biodiversity, our biological diversity is the variety of the life on earth in all its forms, from genes and bacteria to entire ecosystems such as forest or the coral reefs. So the biodiversity we say today, we can say, is the result of 4.5 billion years of the evolutions, increasingly influenced by the humans. We can say, let's have some introduction on that. There is, we can say, ample evidences that climate change actually affect the biodiversity. We can say due to continued climate change is having a predominantly adverse and often we can say irreversible impacts on many ecosystems and their services, with we can say significant negative social, cultural and the economic consequences. However, we can say the link between the biodiversity and the climate change flow both ways. We can say conserving natural, terrestrial, freshwater and marine ecosystems and restoring degraded ecosystems, including we can say the genes and the species diversity, is essential for the overall goals of both the Convention of the Biological Diversity and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, because we can say ecosystem play some kind of the key role in global carbon cycles and in adapting to climate change. So we can say it is also providing a wide range of the ecosystem services that are actually essential for human well-beings and the achievement of the sustainable development goals. Now, let's discuss some of the drivers of the climate change. The first, we can say, emission of the greenhouse gases. We can say steady increase in the emission of the greenhouse gases due to human activities has been the primary driver for the climate change. The principal, we can say, greenhouse gases are the carbon dioxides, methane and a limited extent to nitrous oxides. So we can say the greenhouse gases emissions mainly come from burning fossil fuels like coal, oil and natural gas for cars and the industries. So we can say this process release carbon into the air in both ways, when fossil fuels are actually taken out of the grounds and when they are actually used. We can say if we find out before the industrial revolutions, the amount of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was about 280 parts per millions, but by 2019 it had risen to 412 parts per millions. So you can find out how drastic changes are there before and after industrial revolutions. So we can say as the atmospheres get warmer, the oceans temperatures actually also rise too. So oceans play a very big part in the global carbon cycles by absorbing around 25% of the carbon dioxide released actually by the human activities. So we can say some carbon dioxides also dissolved in the ocean water, thus forming carbonic acids which makes the water more acidic. We can say these rising temperatures and the acidity actually reduce the ocean's ability to store carbon and harm ocean ecosystems and the communities that actually dependent on them. Forests are the main, we can say, sinks of the carbon, atmospheric carbon dioxides. After the, we can say, industrial revolutions, the trend began to change. Increasing proportion of the deforestation is actually being driven by the demands of urbanization, industrial activities and large-scale agriculture. A new satellite map has indicated that field crops have been extended to 1 million additional square kilometers of the land over the past 2 decades, and about half of this newly extended land has replaced forests and other ecosystems. In the recent decades, the demand on forests to grow plantation crops such as oil palm, coffee, tea and rubber, and for cattle ranching and mining have increased enormously, thus reducing the forest cover. According to the one report of the World Wildlife Fund, over 43 billion hectares of the forest actually was lost between 2004 to 2017, and out of 377 million hectares monitored around the world. So we can say increase in the atmospheric temperatures has serious consequences on biodiversity and the ecosystem and the human well-beings. One of the obvious changes we can observe in the recent year is the extreme and unpredictable weathers, and an increase in the frequency and intensity of the natural disaster that we can see nowadays everywhere. Let's take some example. Brazil's in south central regions saw one of the worst droughts in 2021, with the result that many major reservoirs reach less than 20% capacity, thus seriously affecting farming and the energy generations. So we can say an increase in the frequency and the intensity of the natural disasters such as floods and droughts, cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons and the wildlife have become very obvious. Top 5 countries that are actually being affected by the climate change in 2021 includes Japan, Philippines, Germany, Madagascar, and India is also one of them. So we can say apart from causing death of the large number of the humans and other animals, economic losses suffered by both urban and rural populations have been enormous. Deadly floods and landslides, we can say, during 2020 forced about 20 million people leave their homes in India, Nepal and Bangladesh. This global warming is causing, we can say, mean sea level rise in two ways. On the one hand, the melting of the glaciers, the polar ice caps and the Atlantic ice shelves are adding water to the oceans. And on the other hand, the volume of the ocean is actually expanding as the water warms. So we can say the Himalayan mountain range is considered to hold the world's third largest amount of the glacier size after Arctic and Antarctic regions. It is considered as Asian water towers. The meltwater from the Himalayan glacier provide the source of the fresh water to nearly 2 billion people living along the mountain valleys and the lowland around the Himalayas. So these glaciers are melting at unprecedented rates. Recently, one study by the King in 2021 actually find out that the 79 glaciers close to Mount Everest by analyzing mass change measurements from satellite archives, and reported that the rate of the ice loss from the glaciers constantly increased since the early 1960, and this loss is likely to increase in the coming years due to further warming. Another is also impact the we can say crop productivity and human health. Many studies have shown that climate change is causing crop productivity to decline. One global data on wheat, maize, rice suggests that crop loss could rise by 10 to 25% with each degree Celsius increase in temperatures. So some studies have also found that heat waves and droughts have roughly tripled crop loss over the past 50 years. We can say in total climate related stress on crops would cost over $170 billion on each year and is serious threat to the global food security. Climate change is also reducing the nutritional quality of the food grains. For example, higher carbon dioxide level in the airs lower the amount of the protein, minerals and the vitamin in rice. This may also be happening in the other cereal crops. So global warming also, we can say, impact the crop productivity by affecting pollinators. Insect pollinators help produce 75% of the world's main food crops. So we can say the climate change is a major factor in the decline of pollinator numbers and as well as their diversity. We can say air pollution is another concern. Air pollution is a major environmental risk related to the climate change, as it is harm public health by increasing the illness and death rates. The main air pollutants are, we can say, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides and the sulfur dioxides. So these pollutants lead to respiratory issues like asthma, bronchitis and lung cancer. We can say certain disease like Zika fever, dengue and chikungunya are spread by the Aedes mosquitoes and are usually limited to the monsoon seasons. So we can say, however, the global warming actually helps these diseases to spread over more areas and for long period, putting new populations and regions at a risk of these disease. Other, we can say, what's the impact it's on the, we can say, biodiversity on the terrestrial species. Climate change is having a several major impacts on the biodiversity. We can say higher temperatures, or we can say affecting two key areas in growth, survival of the plants and the animals, whether they leave, we can say, distribution range and the timing of their events, we can say phenology. So plant and animal species have adapted to their specific environment over thousands of years. As temperature actually rise, the species are moving to higher altitudes and closer to the poles to find suitable conditions. So many reports actually suggest and shows that the climate change is causing shifts in the habitat of both plants as well as the animals. So these shifts are actually, we can say, are threatened species in protected areas where many have limited range and may struggle to survive as conditions change. So we can say many studies have shown that the birds are especially sensitive to climate change as it affects their breeding seasons, migration, habitat and population sizes. These when humans actually produce these greenhouse gases, about half of the emissions stay in the atmospheres, while the other half is absorbed by the by land and the oceans. So these ecosystems with a rich biodiversity act as a natural carbon sinks, offering nature-based solution to combat climate change. So for instance, we can say protecting and managing and restoring forest provides roughly 2/3 of the total carbon reduction potential from nature-based solutions. Despite, we can say, large and ongoing losses, forests still cover about 30% of the earth land. So we can say the peatlands, we can say wetlands like marshes and swamps make only 3% of the world land, but holds, we can say, twice as much carbon as all forests. So we can say the preserving and restoring peatlands requires keeping them wet to prevent carbon from oxidizing and escaping into the atmospheres. So we can say ocean habitats such as seagrass, mangroves, can capture carbon dioxide from the air as its rate of 4 times higher than the land forest. So this makes, we can say, mangroves especially valuable in fighting climate change. So conserving and restoring natural areas both on land and in water is essential for reducing carbon emissions as well as adapting to a changing climate. So we can say improving nature's ability to absorb emissions could achieve about 1/3 of the greenhouse gases reductions that is actually needed in the next decade. So we can say what are the, we can say, climate change driving extinctions. Well, we can say climate change poses a serious threat to the biodiversity, and it is estimated the global temperature rise of just 2 degrees Celsius puts, we can say, 5% of the species at the risk of extinctions, while an increase of 4.3 degrees Celsius rise the risk of about 60% of the species. So some studies is also, we can say, suggest that the climate change alone could lead to extinction of half of the all known species on the earth. So for many species, the pace of the climate change is too rapid for them to migrate or adapt. Additionally, we can say there are limits to extent they can alter their, either they can alter their physiology to cope with these changes. So we can say the combined pressure of the climate change and human activities such as habitat destructions, we can say, are expected to have an even more severe impact on the biodiversity. This loss of the biodiversity, we can say, weakens the health and the functioning of the ecosystem, thus reducing their resilience and their capacity to withstand and recover from the climate-related hazards like droughts, floods and the storms. So we can say consequently declining biodiversity increase the climate vulnerability of our landscape. Another, how it actually impact, we can say, what impact they have on the marine species. Among, we can say, marine species, coral are the most impacted due to rise in oceans, temperatures and acidity. And one report of the UNESCO that coral reefs in all 29 reef containing World Heritage Sites could stop functioning as ecosystem by the end of this century if the greenhouse gases emission persist at the current rate. So these figures are actually alarming. Additionally, we can say global warming induced ice melt in the Arctic threatens the survival of the many native species like polar bears, Arctic foxes and the Arctic wolves. So rising, we can say, sea level also contribute to the extinction of the numerous endangered and animal species in submerged coastal areas and the islands. Globally, we can say our 1,80,000 islands hold 20% of the world biodiversity, And there is, we can say, one scientist in 2013 evaluated the potential extinction risks for the endemic species in 10 insular biodiversity hotspots under sea level rise of 1 to 6 meters. What kind of the linkage is there between the climate change and the biodiversity? Biodiversity plays a crucial role, we can say, in mitigating the effects of the climate change, or we can say the climate change is predicted to greatly disrupt ecosystem and the further reduce biodiversity. Taking these two challenges together, we can say, is vital to ensure that the actions to combat one issue do not harm the others. So we can say the climate change, biodiversity loss and the pollution from the connected triple global crises the world actually currently faces. Addressing them together is very important, is essential to advancing the sustainable development goals and ensuring a sustainable futures on our planet. We can say government address climate change and the biodiversity through two separate international agreements, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the UN Convention on the Biological Diversity, were both established at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. We can say similar to the landmark Paris Agreements of 2015 under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Parties to the Biodiversity Convention adopted the Economic Monitoring Global Biodiversity Framework in December 2022. So this new framework, which actually follows the 210 each biodiversity targets, outlines global action some kind to address biodiversity loss, including climate change and the pollutions. So we can say the UN Secretary Generals also stated that and ruthless and effective post-2020 global biodiversity frameworks with clear targets and the benchmark can put nature and the people back on the track. He also emphasized that this framework actually should align with the Paris agreements and other multilateral agreements on the forests, desertifications and the oceans. So in December 2022, the governments gathered in Montreal, Canada to finalize this framework, setting an determined transformative plan for humanity to live in harmony with nature. So what are the different mitigation measures that we can adopt for that? The main strategies to mitigate climate change are clear. They include a substantial reduction in the greenhouse gases emissions that we already discussed, preventing deforestation and also expanding forest covers. So these things are very, very important. Also, reducing greenhouse gas emissions require a significant decrease in the use of the coal and the fossil fuels. So as climate change is a global issue, more than solution to one or a few countries is needed. A coordinated global effort is very, very essential. We can say numerous initiatives have been pursued worldwide for decades to meet these goals. We can say the mitigation efforts are largely conducted through diplomatic negotiations, thus involving countries, international organizations, government and some NGOs. We can say these intergovernmental panels on the climate change was established by the United Nations and the World Meteorological Organization in 1988. Its mission is to provide policymakers with regular scientific assessment of the climate change, its effects and the risk, and to suggest the adaptation and the mitigation strategies that are very, very important for climate change. What are the nature-based solutions to the climate change? Nature-based solution that we already discussed is to hold great potentials to help meet the global climate change crisis by staying below 2 degrees of the global warming, adapt to a warmer world and enhance the biodiversity by leveraging natural systems such as expanding wetlands along rivers, or we can say establishing salt marshes along coastlines. We can create some kind of the buffer that absorb floods as well as the boost the biodiversity also. Likewise, we can say planting more and more number of the trees and preventing deforestations, increase carbon storage, contributing to the climate mitigations while providing habitats for the diverse species where they can actually survive and thrive. Additionally, by making agriculture more nature inclusive, we can actually improve its resilience to drought and extreme weather. So with this, we can end today's lectures, and in the next lecture, we will continue to discuss some new interesting topic. Thank you, dear students.